So I wanted to take this opportunity to make an NFL video to talk about the National Football League. When I started making these videos, my plan was to have a lot more football videos. A couple things happened. First of all, the Caitlin Clark and WNBA situation was just far too interesting. I had somebody say, because I made a comment in the last video, that, you know, I didn't intend for this to be a WNBA channel. And they're like, hey, it's your channel. You do whatever you want. This person is absolutely correct. I appreciate it. I appreciate all feedback, good and bad. There's some people that have, saying things like, don't do the full face thing. And they're right. So I'm making an effort not to do that because I went back and watched it and I can see where that would be a put off. Um, so, but yeah, just to do a little bit of clarification for what I said in the last video. I didn't intend for this to be a WNBA channel, but I mean, I've been personally fascinated by it. It's a subject that I've been fascinated by talking about. But I would like to talk about the NFL too. But the reason I've not talked about them as much is I've just not been as fascinated by it this year. Now, some of that's the fact I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, and there's just really nothing left to say about them. I was going to make a reaction video every week, and I missed one week because our power was out after the storm, which we were very lucky only to have power outage. Um, the other thing is, with I didn't do one last week just because, I mean, what's left to say? We're bad. Whether we got Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, uh, anybody. You can put anybody you want to in there. We're not going to do good. David Tepper, I've talked about ad nauseum. It's just something. I mean, I hope we do better. The Carolina Panthers are my team. I'll always be a Panthers fan, but I mean, at this point, what's left to say? These last 6 or 7 years under the Tepper regime have just been misery, and it just keeps getting worse. So, but I want to talk about two teams that have kind of caught my interest this year for unfortunately all the wrong reasons, and I hate it for them. Two very different franchises as far as their history and as far as their recent history, and two very different ways they've gone about it. And that's the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Jets, two very disappointing teams this season. The Dallas Cowboys are coming off of 3 consecutive 12-win seasons. They had the number 2 seed last year. Looked like they were finally going to be able to make a run. Looks like they were going to be able to go back to San Francisco and maybe try to avenge themselves, maybe make it to their first conference finals, or the conference championship game since 1995, which was the Panthers' first season in the NFL. To put some context on that, and they lost their very first game at home to a very young Green Bay Packers team with Jordan Love making his playoff debut, and they just went in there and beat the brakes off of them. Even with two garbage time fourth quarter touchdowns by Dallas, the score was still just didn't tell the story. It was bad, and they've walked into this season and it's been even worse. They're 3-4, which might not sound bad, but they've lost some pretty ugly games. They lost a very ugly game at home to Detroit, who just again beat the brakes off of them. They lost an ugly home game. They lost all their games at home, and they lost a home game to New Orleans, who's been up and down this year, to say the very least. And New Orleans beat the brakes off of them in Jerry World in Dallas. And, there's been a lot of questions there about their quarterback, Dak Prescott. He got a big contract, highest paid player in the NFL. Of course, highest paid NFL history. Anytime you're the highest paid player, you're most likely going to be the highest paid in the history of the sport. But just gave him a colossal contract. There was a lot of discussion. Does he deserve this contract based off his past play? The fact that he's had some very good regular seasons and just has never translated to playoff success. Do you ride that train and hope that he can get it together eventually, or do you move on and try to go to a younger quarterback? And I can see where Dallas came from. Like I said, coming off of 3 straight 12-win seasons. Yeah, they had disappointing playoff exits, but, good quarterbacks in this league are hard to come by. And when you have a team like Dallas has, or that we thought they were going to have, you got to keep that quarterback and pay him whatever it takes. and unfortunately, it's blown up in their faces because he's not been great. Their offense is bad. Mike McCarthy as a head coach is never a good thing. He won a Super Bowl with somebody I'm going to talk about in a second, Aaron Rodgers, with Green Bay, but I feel like he kind of kept him from winning a few more. But it's kind of crazy to see them just fall like this. It's like the last few years of disappointment finally just took their toll on them. He said it with a lot of teams. Most teams, when they have their disappointments like that, they have a hard time. They eventually catches up to you. Things start going bad, and you're like, here we go again, and your mind just kind of, your mentally just kind of go away. And looks like that's what they're doing. Dak looks like he's pressing probably a little bit. Just trying to make stuff happen, trying to be, the high, live up to his contract. And like I said, that's where the organization needs to, put their arm around him and say, look, just go out there and be you, and let us worry about everything else. That's where Jerry Jones needs to do that. I don't know if he's done that or not, but Jerry Jones has a very extensive history of not being a good leader of a franchise. His players like him. That might not be such a good thing. Seems like the best leaders, there's always been a kind of an underlying hint of resentment, but at the end of the day, they're bringing the best out of them. So Jerry Jones to me is not a leader. His role as GM is just speaks for itself. Ever since he kind of strong-armed Jimmy Johnson out the door at the end of the '93 season, you can see it. Troy Aikman's talked about it. I know they won another Super Bowl with Barry Switzer with Jimmy's team. Basically just letting them do whatever, basically letting them run themselves, but and it's just been downhill since then. Jerry Jones cannot build a team, and Dak to me has been set up to fail. He's not done himself any favors, but at the same time, I do feel like Dak has been set up to fail, and he is obliged and failed this year. I don't think they're putting him in the right situations. I don't think they've shielded him enough for having this contract. I don't think they've done enough to mitigate the expectations placed upon him. And you just have to do better than that. So I don't see them doing much. They got a tough schedule ahead before they mercifully play Carolina, which is definitely gonna be a win for them. But if they lose that game, forget about it. They just blow it up. Literally, they blow it up. They just need to implode the stadium like they imploded the old Texas stadium, rebuild a new stadium, and maybe even refranchise America's team. Who knows? It's just been way too long, way too much, too many talented players stepping through for them to have not even made the conference championship, the NFC championship game since 1995. Last time they made the conference championship, the Atlanta Braves had just finished celebrating their first World Series championship. They won their second World Series championship 26 years later in 2021. That was 3 years ago. So you do the math. So we're coming up on 30 years, so it's bad. And I also want to talk about the New York Jets. I mean, you talk about a dumpster fire of an organization. Now, unlike the Cowboys, they don't really have any history of greatness. They had that one incredible moment in time. Joe Namath going against the juggernaut Baltimore Colts, Super Bowl III, guaranteed victory. Everybody was talking about how bad the Colts were going to kick their ass, and he said, "No, we're going to win," and they won. They did the job and brought that Super Bowl championship home to the New York Jets. That was in 1968. That was a long time ago. Broadway Joe, he's still up and kicking. I mean, thank God for that. I'm glad he's a treasure. Always good to see him. As long as he's not super drunk on Monday Night Football, but he seems to have bounced back from that, so I'm proud of him for that. They picked up Aaron Rodgers last year. You know the story. Shows up in the game, like third play of the game, tears his Achilles, out for the season. The Jets didn't have a horrible season, all things considered, considering they, basically mortgaged everything on Aaron Rodgers for that year. And they had some quarterbacks that have been very much maligned, like Zach Wilson. But, I mean, they showed some pretty good, especially defensively, they showed some very good flashes and looked like if Aaron Rodgers can get this Achilles injury healed, they're going to do good. But they came back this year, and I mean, their defense looks bad. Aaron Rodgers looks, I don't know. I don't even know what to say about him. He does not look like Aaron Rodgers. Um, I do give him credit. He Joe Namath, who his number 12 was rightfully retired for the New York Jets. Some people want to say his career is overrated, to which I respond, he won a Super Bowl for the New York freaking Jets. That doesn't happen. That's been a sorry franchise from its existence, from one of the New York Titans way back in the 60s, early 60s to now. They have that pretty much one shining moment, and about every 25 years, a good moment will pop up, like when they made it to the conference championship. I believe it was John Elway's last season, and lost in Mile High in Denver. And John Elway's last game there on his way to his last game ever, winning his second straight Super Bowl. But they've just made horrible organizational decisions, horrible personnel decisions, horrible coaching decisions. I mean, you name it. I mean, Bill Belichick, before he was Bill Belichick, agreed to become the head coach, did the press conference. 24 hours later, he's doing another press conference saying that he's resigning. I guess those 24 hours of being a New York Jets head coach got to him, and I can't really blame him. He went to the Patriots, and the rest is history. But, Aaron Rodgers, declined that offer respectfully, and I give him credit for that. He went back to his college number 8, and it's kind of fitting because he just does not look like number 12. The number 12 we saw in the Green Bay Packers. I guess he's always going to be compared to Brett Favre. Like Brett Favre, he had a long run in Green Bay, a lot of success, and only one Super Bowl championship. Which you kind of look back and say, man, how is it not more? And there's some playoff disappointments, and some of them were Aaron just not showing up, and some of them were him showing up and the defense just giving up everything. So on one hand, you can't blame it all on him. On the other hand, you just can't help but feel like he should have won at least one more, probably 2 or 3 more. Aaron Rodgers is quite possibly the most talented quarterback ever to step out there as far as throwing the ball. There's a lot more to being a quarterback than throwing the ball. He's a lot better at just a pure passer than even Joe Montana. Is he in Joe Montana's league as far as rankings? No. And that's one thing that's kind of been interesting to me about Aaron Rodgers. To me, he had a lot to gain by this. Because, like I said, he's going to go down as one of the greatest ever. 4 MVPs. He won that Super Bowl. Some really good playoff performances along the way. I know it didn't only translate to Super Bowl once, but you can't take that away. But at the same time, I feel like he really had something to gain by going to another team, and even if he didn't win the championship, doing really well. Think of Joe Montana with the Chiefs. I feel like that kind of cemented his legacy as, the number one guy ever at the time, and now, with Tom Brady and what he's done, who also went somewhere late in his career and actually won the Super Bowl. Those two went to other teams and late in their career and really increased their legacy and show that they can do it without being in their familiar, comfortable surroundings that they'd been in for so long. Aaron's not doing that. He looks lost. He looks lost out there. He looks like a guy that is in a completely foreign environment to him, that he's used to Green Bay, and just doesn't look right there. I look at, Brett Favre had his one season of the Jets before going to the Vikings and almost making a Super Bowl. They started off 8-3 with Brett Favre, and he didn't look as lost. I mean, he didn't look right. He looked like, he was trying to figure the offense out, and they ultimately missed the playoffs. I think he had a little bit of an injury at the end of the year, and his play fell off. But he looked a whole lot better than Aaron Rodgers is looking this year. There's no question about that. But to me, Aaron had a lot to gain. And, right now, I dare I say he's kind of hurting his legacy in a number of ways because, he's gone here. The Jets have mortgaged everything for him. They brought in, his coaches, his receivers. They traded for Devontae Adams. And it's just seems like the more they do, the worse they get. They fired their coach, Robert Salah, and that's looking like a mistake. Looks like he actually had a pretty good understanding of that, and he's probably his stock for being a future head coach somewhere else is probably going up by the day. Um, so it's hard to say, but he just doesn't look right. And I don't know if that's age. I mean, some of his age, he's clearly doesn't have the mobility that he once had that helped him a lot. But I mean, he's not throwing the ball great either, and he looks like he just doesn't know where to go. Um, and I know he wanted Devontae Adams. I think Devontae Adams, he said, was his favorite receiver ever at Green Bay all those years in the Packers. And they brought him in. But the thing of it is, the whole getting the band back together in sports just rarely works. I mean, for every, you can talk about Brady and Gronk going to Tampa Bay together and winning that Super Bowl. They were, what, 1 year removed from being on the Patriots together. They still had a lot of chemistry there, and plus, you're talking about the best quarterback ever, and probably the best tight end ever. I think Tony Gonzalez is probably better, but he didn't have all the postseason exploits because he never had Tom Brady throwing it to him. So you can go back and forth on that one, but I mean, getting the band back together at another team just rarely ever works. Looks like Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers are example number 32,000 of this. Um, so they just, to me, the organization's made a lot of bad moves. Aaron Rodgers has not helped himself at all, and I think it's gonna hurt his legacy. Like I said, it's nothing new to see great quarterbacks, go to different teams for the last couple of years of their career. Johnny Unitas, I'm pretty sure, is the San Diego Chargers. There's some pictures of him wearing his number 19 in that powder blue and gold. Looked. Yeah, I love those jerseys, but I mean, it looked kind of weird with Johnny Unitas in one when I'm used to him in that, plain, blue and white, very traditional Baltimore Colts uniforms. Joe Namath himself went to the Los Angeles Rams at the end of his career, and looked off there. Kenny Stabler, the Snake, the face of the Oakland Raiders era, the greatest Oakland Raiders quarterback ever. He played in a few different teams, and he looked weird playing for the Saints, the Oilers, you name it. But I don't feel like any of them really damaged their career. To me, Aaron Rodgers, this was an opportunity for him to really put himself in that legend among legends class. Alongside Tom Brady, Joe Montana, John Elway. Um, I know he never won a championship, but Dan Marino, he was so far ahead of his time. I mean, nobody knew what to do with him. And to me, Aaron's really kind of, taking away his chance to be in there. He's losing ground. To me, I think, the obvious Brett Favre, comparisons, even though he never turned the ball over anywhere close to the number of times Brett Favre did, you almost have to look at it and say Brett Favre had a better career with Green Bay and overall because he took them to a second Super Bowl where they lost to John Elway on the quarterback's Mount Rushmore, and even though it was an upset, and at the end of his career, he went to the Jets, had an okay season, then he went to Minnesota and had them on the verge of a Super Bowl before throwing another one of his classic interceptions. But it's just I think he's hurt himself. I really think he's hurt himself with this. The media hates him, and it's unfair in a number of ways just because his politics don't align with their politics. And it's just a lesson. Don't ever let your politics get involved with stuff like that. Nobody cares about your politics when you put your politics out there. I mean, like, for me personally, I agree with a lot of his politics, especially when it comes to, like, the shot, the jab. But, that's probably something he probably should have kept to himself. Because now the media is going to trash him for it, which, I mean, they're wrong for, but, it's just, it's a distraction. He didn't show up to the mandatory mini camps, and some of the rumors were that he was off with RFK Jr. Again, somebody I personally, have a lot of respect for, but, you don't do that publicly. Leave politics out of it, I just, whether you're left wing, right wing, whatever, leave it out of it. Just let us watch sports. And but to me, he's hurt himself. I think Patrick Mahomes has already leapfrogged him in the all-time rankings. 4 Super Bowl appearances, 3 Super Bowl wins. They might not have been the prettiest in the world, but he did it. And, that's all there is to it. So, I just think, I think he's hurt himself. I think he's not only did he miss the chance to really, up himself in the rankings, I think he's kind of dropped himself down the all time. Like I said, it doesn't take away the 4 MVPs, the Super Bowl title, the decades of brilliance. But I just think, ultimately it's going to harm him in the overall rankings. I'd be like, oh, yeah, weren't you the guy who went to the Jets and stunk it up worse than normal for the Jets? I mean, they lost to the Patriots a couple Sunday, a very, very bad Patriots team with injuries to their players, to their starters who weren't good to start with. And again, a lot of that's on the organization, but I mean, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you got to, he said after the game, we need to put up 30 every week. We're underachieving. How do you not put up 30 against that Patriots team? So it is what it is. So that's kind of my thoughts on those two teams. They kind of seem to be dumpster fires at the moment, and see if they can turn it around or have anything different happen. But it's not looking good. It's looking like the morale's starting to drop, and once that happens, it's just a snowball straight into hell. So hate that for everybody involved there, but it is a fascinating story, and just they can take solace in the fact they're not the Carolina Panthers. So thank you guys again for watching. Like I said, the subscriber count and the view count, I never saw this coming, especially this early. Thank you. Hope to eventually, kind of set up an actual studio here, and maybe get an actual webcam and audio recorder microphone, and do some real videos or real looking videos. But that's a little off in the future. So thank you guys for hanging with me, and I'll talk to you later.